Balón para la aparición de Timber. Timber que se apoya en Odegaard, se desmarca, Bukayo saca para el bala pelota, línea de fondo, la pone atrás para Rice. Declan, doblete Rice. Para delirio de los desplazados del Arsenal en el Vitality Stadium. Doblete de Declan Rice.
This is Arsecast Extra.
Hello and welcome to another Arsecast Extra, as always, with James from Gunnerblog. A very chilly, goodly morning to you, James.
Goodly morning, Andrew. Goodly morning. It's definitely one of those, especially after the weekend that we've had.
Yeah. Yeah. It's cold where you are too, I take it.
Oh, it's cold, but my heart is warm. It's thawing my body.
What a weekend it's been. Holy crap. There's a lot going on in the Premier League, isn't there?
Well, there is, as we're about to start recording. I mean, the one blight on this wonderful weekend, Ruben Amorim, has been dismissed moments ago. Sad to see him go, really, Andrew. I think we had a good thing going there.
Yeah, I would say I'm not entirely convinced it's all his fault, you know. I do think you need to ask questions. When a Sir Jimmy is running your football club, there's probably no good can come of that, you know. What do United do now, though?
Now then, Andrew, I'm not sure about that.
What do they do now, though?
Give it Giggsy to the end of the season.
Is that where we are?
Darren Fletcher, apparently.
Darren Fletcher. Well, you know what's going to happen now. I only learned last week that he's got like 2 kids on the bench for Manchester United. There's 2 Fletcher boys and they're his sons. Are they twins? I don't know.
I don't know.
But
they'll both be starting at the weekend.
They'll be starting. There's no end to the corruption in the world, is there? Dad's going to pick his boys, you know.
I mean, I suppose he learnt from the best in Sir Alex Ferguson. He wasn't shy about, you know, giving a job to a family member. So, so sorry to see you go, Ruben. Honestly, I know it's not all his fault, but the kind of the persistence with the back three, despite it not working, that was a sort of running gag that I really enjoyed. I began to worry recently when he had that game where he switched to a back four.
And it worked.
But then I realised that was just a sort of amusing toying with the United fans' emotions before going back to the back three.
Well, where do you stand on that, really? I mean, we'll talk about this a bit more later on over on Patreon when we do the 30 with Phil, you know, round up all the weekend's Premier League action. But this idea that, you know, this was his system, this was the way Manchester United knew he played, and they did nothing to facilitate that. Was it down to Amorim to adapt and just use the players that he had in a better way? Or was it the fault of the club, knowing full well that this was the tactic that he liked to employ? They hired him. Should they not have given him the players?
I mean, it's not like they didn't spend money, Andrew. That's all I would say. I mean, I think, you know, they bought in at least one wing back, didn't they, in Dorgu? The idea was for him to play at wing back. But if you look at what they spent this summer, it's, you know, 80 million on Sesko, 65 million or something on Burmo, 60 million on Cunha. I think they bought Ugarte, did they, last January, maybe? I can't remember. But I think they've spent money there. Maybe they didn't spend it necessarily in the ways Amorim wanted. I don't know. I think you're being a bit generous to him. I think the results were really terrible, and I think that squad is not great, but I don't think it's quite as bad as they were made to look at times. And I always think about Mikel Arteta as well. I always think, you know, yeah, he had probably an idea of the football he wanted to play, but in those first couple of years at Arsenal, he had to adapt. Yeah. He had to play a different system. In his case, it was a back three a lot of the time, but he had to play a whole style of football that is actually quite a far cry away from what we see at this point in time. And I think, well, to quote Roy Keane, that's his job.
That's his job, yeah. I suppose the one thing I should just make clear before we move on to talk about our win over Bournemouth is that when it comes to Ruben Amorim or Manchester, I don't really give a fuck, you know?
Yeah.
And I was just sort of throwing that out there for the sake of discussion. Like, if it goes wrong for Amorim, I don't care. Once it goes wrong for Manchester United, and I hope it goes wrong for Darren Fletcher and whichever hapless bastard comes after him, I hope it goes wrong for them for all eternity.
Sure.
Just wanted to get that out on the table in case anybody thought there was sort of a measure of sympathy from my end towards any of the characters involved in this, because there isn't and never will be.
There's huge sympathy from me towards Amorim. I think it's a disgrace that he's been sacked. I think he should have been given, a 10-year deal.
5 more years. 5 more years.
I was thoroughly enjoying it. But all I can say about Manchester United is I've thoroughly enjoyed the last few managers there, and they've all provided entertainment in their own way.
Are they now in the Tottenham zone? The zone in which, right, when you look at an appointment, you go, actually, you know what? That could be the guy for Manchester United. You know, I was sort of, when Amorim was appointed and having seen the job that he did in Portugal, I was like, he could be just the kind of guy they want. Young manager, good ideas, has a successful team, track record of winning. He could be that guy. It's sort of like with Tottenham, right? You don't get worried. You see someone like Antonio Conte come in, you go like, well, he's got this incredible track record of winning things as a manager, but the Tottenham DNA will not allow him to succeed there. That is just, they are what they are. Are Man United in that sort of zone now where you look at an appointment and you go, maybe he's the guy, but deep down now, it's just such a fucking fundamental mess, it won't work?
Well, first of all, Andrew, if this season has taught us anything, it's that you can't trust someone's record in Portugal. I would have thought that would have been clear by now. Second of all, yes, I think United are a sort of basket case at this point in time, aren't they?
I think so.
And actually, I think they're at the point where surely if you're a top manager, if you're the top bracket of manager, you're going to have real reservations and concerns about taking that job.
Fair enough. And listen, I think we all appreciated your little dig at Darwin Núñez there as well. So let's move it on and let's talk about Arsenal's 3-2 win away to Bournemouth at the Vitality Stadium on Saturday. When the team came out, I will admit I was a little bit surprised to see Declan Rice in there, because in the press conference, Mikel Arteta was like, well, his knee is still swollen. We'll wait and see what the story is with him. And I felt kind of with Liverpool coming up, it might be the kind of game where they exercised a no-risk strategy with Declan Rice. I mean, I'm glad they didn't, and I'm glad that either the knee was fine or they deemed the risk a risk worth taking because of how it all played out. Beyond that, not a great deal of surprise in the team, beyond the fact that he did rotate in the front three. Noni Madueke coming in for Bukayo Saka and Gabriel Martinelli for Leandro Trossard.
Yeah, and actually, I still think that's significant. I mean, I haven't trawled through the games personally, and maybe you'll know better than me, but I can't think of too many occasions when Bukayo Saka has truly been rested from the start of a Premier League game. I just don't think we've had that luxury on many occasions before. So even this season, there have been long periods where we've kind of had one of Madueke or Saka available. So I felt that was significant. And yeah, I think inevitable to freshen the team up a bit. I was with you in that I kind of thought maybe sit Declan Rice for this one as well, if there's absolutely any risk whatsoever. Well, presumably they just felt, he was ready, and boy, were they right about that.
They were right about that. Anyway, listen, it started relatively evenly, and then there's this incredible, sort of inexplicable mistake from Gabriel to hand Bournemouth the lead. I will say, I've watched this back numerous times, and I still can't really figure out what it is beyond just a a complete lapse in concentration from Gabriel, playing a ball across the box straight to Evan Nielsen. Evan Nielsen there was like a half a second where he was like, what the fuck? When you notice it, he's like, oh, what? Oh, fuck, I better score here. And so he goes on and scores. It's, in football, there are things a manager can do to prepare his team, prepare his players, in all aspects of the game. Maybe you can apply it, let's say, to what happened to Liverpool yesterday, right? Where Harrison Reed smacks one top corner in the 97th minute. Like, I don't think you can really legislate for that as a manager in the same way you can't legislate for Gabriel doing what he did in that moment. Do you have any theory beyond it being a lapse in concentration? Was he expecting maybe David Raya to be standing where Evan Nielsen was?
Well, first of all, I would say I think both the Bournemouth goals in this game are kind of goals you can only legislate against to a certain degree. I mean, one is a freak defensive error, as we're talking about now, and one is a very good strike from range. And I saw Arne Slot sort of lamenting the nature of the goals Liverpool conceded in their 2-2 draw with Fulham. And the very simple way to overcome it, Andrew, is just score 3. Which Arsenal, of course, did this weekend. But I do have a little pet theory on what Gabriel is attempting to do here.
Right.
For what it's worth. I think he's trying to find Jurrien Timber, who is kind of in that sort of number 6 area ahead of him and is unmarked. And I think he's trying to sweep the ball out like into Timber.
Yeah, maybe so.
With the sort of top of his instep. And actually the ball comes off his heel. And it's just a bad contact that sends it straight to Evan Nielsen. It's a bit of a risky pass from Gabriel, but it's a pass I think he's got in his locker. I always say, like, when you're... And we sort of haven't said this as much regularly because we've got so good at it. But you remember years ago, or a couple of seasons ago, we conceded quite a lot of goals like this with like goalkeeper error or, back passes that weren't quite right, or basically playing out and getting caught. And, we used to say things like, if you play out all season long, you're probably going to get caught once or twice. And the reality is we've become so good now that it basically never happens. This is probably our one for the season. And it is a bit of a freak moment. And I sort of think it's an accepted risk of the way that we play. But it is definitely an error from Gabriel. He absolutely knew it. But the wonderful thing about him is that he's got this knack of atoning for it when it happens. Yeah,
he did it before. Was it against Fulham where he gave a goal away or was at fault for a goal anyway? I think a game we won 2-1 in the end. And he scored to make up for that error, and he scored to make up for this error pretty quickly. I did like the response, by the way, of the away fans. You could hear immediately the Gabriel song start to ring out. And Noni Madueke, by the way, who I think probably should have hit the target with a great chance earlier on, was involved in the equaliser. Some really good work driving into their box. It was a free kick, I think, that was cleared. Came out to Madueke. Got beyond a couple of players, pulled it back. Martinelli's shot was blocked. It fell for Gabriel. And actually, I don't think that's as easy a finish as he made it look. Particularly, with all due respect to my fellow central defenders, particularly for a central defender.
I almost don't know if we can say that of Gabriel because he's so good in the box. And
usually with his head, though, to be fair.
Usually with his head, but he has scored 1 or 2 with his feet, and he has generally taken them well. I agree. I think this is a really good finish. He hasn't, Martinelli has a pop at it, and his attempt is decent. Like, I think he actually puts a bit of direction on it, but there's 3 or 4 Bournemouth players on the line, and one of them gets a block to it. Gabriel manages to steer it into that near post first time. I think it's a really good finish, and I liked, particularly in the early part of this game, Madueke's directness. I think he fancied winning that duel against the Bournemouth left back, whose name escapes me currently. It's not Kirkes anymore.
No, Trufair.
Yeah, Trufair, exactly. Who's had a decent start there, but I think Madueke saw something there he could get at, and he had that chance early on that you mentioned. And here, I really liked, he went past Semenyo far too easily, but the way he got past Truefair, I think it was after that, showed particular skill. And Hincapie, I think, might have had a shout for a penalty if the ball hadn't ended up in the net. I think he was kind of cleaned out as he went to hit it.
Yeah, he did. He did hit the ball, and they were saying, oh, they're checking for a foul on Evan Nielsen, who I think did the thing where you make a foul and then go down to make it look like you've been fouled yourself.
Yeah, I thought it was much more a foul on Hincapie, to be honest. So I think I was going to say, I think we would have had a pen here, but you never really know with PGMOL. I think we should have had a pen here, is what to say, if we hadn't scored. But yeah, Gabriel gets there, and it's a remarkable knack he has of, like I say, making up for these errors. And 20 Premier League goals for him now. I was having a look at the Premier League standings for defensive goal scorers, by the way. He is now 2 off Laurent Koscielny as Arsenal's highest Premier League goal-scoring defender. I'm
going to go out on a limb here,
and
suggest that he will surpass Koscielny.
Do you think so?
Yeah,
this season, or is it going to be like the Bukayo Saka assist thing? Where
don't.
We spoke it into existence. Now it won't happen.
No, I think he's just got a goal-scoring knack, And I'm looking at this finish again. By the way, he has to squeeze it between the central defender and the post and get his foot over the ball to crack it. It's a really, really good finish.
It's really good. A lot of centre forwards would be proud of that.
It's one of those where on first viewing you're like, yeah, he's swung a leg at it, he's caught it right, nice, well done. But when you look at, how little there is for him to aim at by the time the ball comes to him, it's just such a good finish, really composed. So, yeah, I mean, a great response, just 5 minutes after gifting Bournemouth the goal, he scores to get it back on track, back level. And, I think when you do make a mistake like that in a game, there's 2 ways you can respond. One is, there's more than one way, but, you often see, or we've seen players in the past who kind of go into their shell a little bit because of the mistake, and Gabriel is just the complete opposite of that in terms of his character and the way that he responds.
Yeah, totally agree. And he's been so important already. I mean, having come back into the team, he's barely missed a beat. I know obviously made the mistake here, but made up for it. And, I think when Bournemouth went 1-0 up, there was another moment where they went close-ish. Kluivert had a shot from about 25 yards that I think was pretty close to the top corner, to be honest with you.
Oh, the kind of swervy one, yeah.
Yeah, and if that goes in, I think, who knows? It's 2-0 down is a very different thing. But I was really impressed by the resolve Arsenal showed and how quickly they got things level.
I mean, I can say now with the comfort of a win and 3 points under our belts that I was actually impressed with Bournemouth in that first half in particular.
Yeah, they were very good. Yeah.
They're really good, and the way that they provoke you into making mistakes, the number of pressures, they put up the stats on the TV at one point, didn't they? The number of high pressures that they commit to, because it is a high risk, high reward kind of strategy, because if you get played through or if it breaks down, you've committed so many men, there's loads of space in behind. To their credit, they kept at it. And I think, that coupled with maybe an imperfect first half where we weren't quite as precise on the ball in certain times or certain areas as we usually would be, I think they probably had the better of that first 45 minutes. Tavernier, his movement was really, really good. A couple of times there was one at the near post. He sort of flicked it over. To be fair, he was sort of well blocked out. There was a header as well where he'd made a run from deep and flicked a header over the bar. So there was danger from Bournemouth as well, and real intent with the way that they played at home, and we often face teams who, these days anyway, they tend to err on the side of caution when it comes to Arsenal. But Bournemouth were really, really front-footed in this game. And I think, by the time half-time came around, I was relatively pleased to be going in 1-1.
Yeah, I think so. And I do think we weren't quite at our level, shall we say. I don't think we were at our best. And those Tavernier runs were, not they were good runs, but they weren't particularly well tracked from an Arsenal perspective. You know, there were a couple of midfielders letting guys run off them, which is always a bit of a worrying sign. But they do make it really hard for you. I remember one occasion, I think maybe it was a free kick, which Kluivert swung in and Raya claimed it, and he threw it to Odegaard so quickly, because I think Arsenal were just desperate to try and get beyond that press. So they were just really trying to accelerate the way they played out from the back to try and circumnavigate the way Bournemouth were pressing, because they were getting turnovers and they were getting opportunities from them. But I suppose at half-time, one thing I did think was, I'm not sure Bournemouth can sustain that level of performance across 90 minutes. Like, I felt like they didn't necessarily have the lead they needed from what they did in that first 45 minutes.
Maybe that's true. And certainly Arsenal in recent times have been good in the second half and good early in second halves. That was another stat they kept putting up, was how many goals Arsenal have scored in the first 15 minutes of second halves. And that turned out to be the case here. I think this is quite an interesting goal, by the way, because Bournemouth had a chance just before that. If you remember, they took a quick free kick. My instinct was he was very slightly offside, but given some of the offside decisions I've seen over the course of this weekend, I wouldn't put my house on that one. I think it was Brooks who went through and put it wide from a tight angle. I don't think it was ever really that dangerous, but we played the ball forward. It came to Jurrien Timber. He then played it forward. I think maybe Martinelli and Gyökeres didn't have the greatest games, generally speaking, but I think they both play an interesting part in this goal. Martinelli wins a header against a central defender that I'd be furious if one of our central defenders lost that. It's a really good leap, and he flicks it on. And I'm not necessarily a subscriber to the occupy defenders theory around Victor Gyökeres, but I don't think you can argue that in this case he absolutely did. There are about four of them around him, and he occupies them to the point where they can't really get a good clearance on the ball. Falls to Martin Odegaard. Odegaard lays it off to Declan Rice, who's there to sweep it home to make it 2-1. So one of those where winning the ball high up the pitch, or winning a duel, if you like, in that first header with Martinelli leads to danger and then ultimately leads to an Arsenal goal.
Yeah, and despite my little joke at the start of the show, I did think Gyökeres had a better game at Bournemouth. I thought there were a couple of moments in the first half where his hold-up play, I thought, was more of the kind of calibre that we're looking for. There was one really nice flick, perhaps, to play in Martinelli, who ran in behind. I think here his movement is good. The gravitational pull of Gyökeres, draws several defenders away, and I think Arsenal capitalise on that brilliantly. Big credit to Martinelli, who I think that is a great leap and a really good header. I mean, that's sort of what you expect from a centre forward, to be honest with you. Yeah. Although we know he is better in the air than many would anticipate from his brief time playing as a centre forward. And I think, Odegaard, did Declan Rice say after the game that he gave Odegaard a shout on that one? Yeah. I mean, you can sort of see that happen because he doesn't even look Odegaard, just lays it off into his path. And we spoke about the Gabriel one being a good finish. That is a beautiful finish as well. And in fact, was it Don Goodman on the commentary for Sky who, when Madueke kind of thrashed at that chance in the first half, had spoken about needing to pass the ball into the net, but you couldn't find a better example than this. He just cushioned it beautifully into the goal.
I know he annoyed a lot of people with his co-commentary, and I kind of understand why, but I do absolutely take his point there, particularly with that Madueke chance where he'd done the hard work. That was not easy to do, to shape, to make that chance for himself, and he sort of blasted it over. I guess he's looking to put it top corner. So maybe a lesson there. But yeah, you're absolutely right. It's just a really, really good finish from Rice, who I think, when you see him in those positions, there's a sort of security, or you kind of, you would back him to do what he did there. He is a smart first-time finisher. I know he's not scoring millions and millions of goals for Arsenal, but I can think of him hitting the ball first time, at least 3 other goals. There's the one against Chelsea, if you remember, where he scored from distance when the keeper had put the ball, made a bit of a mistake, giving the ball away, and he hit it first time. There was his goal against West Ham, wasn't there? The one where he hit it from range. But again, it was a first-time hit, the ball rolling back to him. There was another one I can't remember, but yeah.
Arguably, the free kicks against Real Madrid are both first.
Well, yes, true, but, open play, I guess.
I forgot the other one. To a moving ball. Yeah. I completely agree. But I suppose we know from his set-piece delivery how good his ball striking is, right? And how consistently he's able to deliver that. I just thought, great goal. He's been talked about occasionally this season as sort of a potential Patrick Vieira successor. And there were shades of Vieira for me here when Rice followed his goal by celebrating with the knee slide off the back of a knee injury. And I felt briefly like throwing up out of sheer anxiety. But, fortunately, all was well. All
right. Well, look, that gave Arsenal the advantage. The game remained, I think, relatively even. And then maybe the greatest indication of Arsenal's strength in depth, squad depth this season came with the triple change that Arsenal were able to make at about 67 minutes. Gyökeres, Madueke and Martinelli come off. On come Saka, Gabriel Jesus and Leandro Trossard. I mean, that's not bad at all, is it? It really is an impressive way to be able to change a game or to maybe shift the momentum of a game, but also in the month of January, when we've got plenty of football to play and loads of minutes to hand around, it's kind of sensible as well, isn't it, to trust in the depth that you have, particularly in those forward positions.
And listen, I think you can make that change sound all the more impressive when you add Eberechi Eze on the bench, unused. Kai Havertz, not in the squad. Ethan Nwaneri, not in the squad. It's an extraordinary amount of depth that Arsenal have, particularly in those attacking areas. So, yeah, hugely impressive, hugely helpful as well in the final stage of the game to be able to introduce that freshness, that level of threat. And
there's a psychological aspect to that as well, isn't there? That if you're the fullbacks and you're looking at, okay, I've had a tough time against Madueke, tough time against Martinelli on the left. Although I think the guy on the right, he's really quick, that guy Jimenez. So I think he sort of had the measure of Martinelli there. But a physical battle, whatever way you want to talk about Gyökeres, he certainly did put himself about. And then all of a sudden, as a defender, you're going, right, fuck, I've got Bukayo Saka now for 25 minutes and Trossard for 25 minutes and Gabriel Jesus for 25 minutes. And it's not like they all came on and were brilliant or anything like that. But I do think as well, it has an impact on a team psychologically when you're looking at that kind of quality coming off the bench.
Psychologically, physically, tactically, it's big. It makes a big difference. And it's interesting. Like I was out at the weekend with a few fans of other clubs. Believe it or not, I have friends that are fans of other clubs. I tolerate them.
Yeah, of course.
And chatting to them about the Premier League and Arsenal's title aspirations, that was the point that they emphasised again and again. They were like, the squad is so big. I think fans of other clubs, they look at our starting 11, they look at our substitutes bench, they look at the players not even on that substitutes bench, and they regard it with envy. And sometimes, other supporters can tell you about what you are and what you've got going for you better than you can sometimes see. And that was the point they made time and time and time again. So yeah, I think that was a sort of statement, triple sub. Really.
Yeah, for sure. So the third goal, Andoni Iraola was not happy because he didn't feel it was a free kick on Jurriën Timber. From there, we play the ball down the right-hand side, Saka to Odegaard. The pass from Odegaard to Saka is just perfection, isn't it? The movement is brilliant from Saka. The pass from Odegaard to find him behind the fullback is really, really good. We've talked a bit about Odegaard of late and how he looks like he's coming back towards his best, and I think we saw that again last night, or on Saturday night, rather. Saka pulls it back, and there's Declan Rice again to pass the ball into the back of the net.
Yeah, it looks easy, doesn't it? When you arrive in the right place, right time, and when the service is that good. I really liked the weight of Odegaard's pass. The fact that it just was so perfectly into Saka's path. I also think Saka deserves a bit of credit for delaying a moment I think there is like a split second where he maybe could play it earlier, but he just holds off a fraction more, which draws the goalkeeper out and leaves the net unguarded. And then it's the simplest of tasks for Declan Rice to finish. And yeah, it was a big goal, that, because, we've spoken a lot about one goal margins, and lo and behold, Bournemouth did get that second goal, right? So this ultimately proved the difference, and a huge performance from Declan Rice. And maybe there is a world where he could have played against Aston Villa. He could have been risked. He could have been, jabbed with painkillers and strapped up and God knows what else. But, would it have been worth it? Would it have been worth it?
As it turns out, probably not. And as it turns out, we did the job without him very well against Aston Villa, which I think is an interesting thing in its own regard. When you have these huge, important players, knowing that if they pick up a small knock or if they're suspended, you can still win games and big games against good opposition without them. I think that's an interesting thing for a team to have in its locker a bit as well, Do you
remember?
Yes.
I think it was maybe, you know what I'm going to say? I think it was a League Cup game where Arsene Wenger picked a starting 11 without Andreas Sharvin, who was kind of the talisman of the team at the time.
Yeah.
Is that what you thought I was going to say?
That's exactly what I thought you were going to say, yeah.
And he said afterwards, I thought it was important for them to learn they could win without him. And as I recall, they did not. And I actually think that sort of dealt a bit of a psychological blow to that team because, suddenly all those fears are kind of realised, we are
dependent,
reliant, absolutely. And I think for the team to have achieved that result without Rice, internally and externally as well, in terms of the perception, I think we may come to regard that as a very, very big moment.
Yeah. And then he threw the gob on the camera, of course, as well. So,
of course. And I hope that you, like me, met it with
everyone falling to their knees.
To their knees in front of their television and licking it ferociously.
Yes, exactly. That was, 70...
73, 74?
72, something like that anyway.
72, I think it might be right, yeah.
And then it was, on TV, they go, I'll be very comfortable now for Arsenal, etc., etc. They got a goal, and a very good goal. And I'll admit, I sort of said to you right after it went in, keeper. But I have to say, on repeated viewings, I don't think you can ask or put any kind of blame on David Raya for this. Maybe if you're looking at a way to stop it, we could close him down a bit quicker. Does he run off the back of Martin Odegaard a bit easily? So sort of 1-2. Zubimendi appears to be sort of involved with another player, so can't get out to block the shot. I think sometimes you just have to acknowledge a really, really, really fine strike. This was a hell of a hit. It was one of those sort of wobbled all over the place. I saw, by the way, that there was... maybe I'm dreaming this. I don't know. Did Michael Cox write a piece about the ball for The Athletic this weekend?
No, he did. I
haven't read it yet. I saw the headline. I saw him post about it on Blue Sky. I haven't read about it yet. But it does strike me that this is a ball that it's a bit wibbly-wobbly. That going into the technical aspects of ball movement, wibbly-wobbly is how I would describe this ball at times.
Yes, I am inclined to agree, actually. Michael Cox did not speak to me about that article beforehand. Why would he? But had he done so, I would have said that I'd heard from quite a few people that this ball moves a lot more. And I remember having conversations last season with people where they said, we're going to see more long-range goals in the Premier League next season because of the ball. I think it's the ball, certainly the manufacturers, that was maybe used in La Liga. And I know that, in training sessions last season, they had a chance to work with it here and there. And there was an immediate feeling of this is going to, I think, be exciting, to be honest, because it's going to we're going to see more goals.
Yeah, there's sort of like what's weird about this one is there's a sort of a double movement on the ball.
Yeah.
But the movement is in the same direction. And you can see Raya almost expects the ball to swerve towards him a little bit, and then it swerves away from, well, it doesn't swerve. It just keeps going on that trajectory away from him. So, yeah, I don't blame the goalkeeper for that. I think it is a really, really good hit from Junior Kroupi, who's an exciting-looking player. Yeah.
I think he's a really good finisher. And in terms of sort of the positioning leading up to it, I saw something online sort of saying, has Zubimendi made a rare positional error here? You've got to remember it's the second phase of a set piece. So we're all defending the edge of the box, right, in a line, and that's what actually affords Kroupi the space to receive the ball and take that shot on. And of course, at that point in time, we're all thinking, here we go again.
Here we go again, yeah.
Another unnecessarily nervy finish.
Yeah. A 1-goal lead. It feels like we're kind of addicted to those. I found this last part of the game quite interesting. You know, I'm not going to say with a 1-goal lead I'm ever completely comfortable, but I didn't feel as nervous as I have done in some of the other games. And I do wonder if there's something to be said or something to be taken from the fact that this is a scenario we have faced a lot. Like, ideally, you want to be 2 goals ahead or 3 goals ahead, right? But if you're 1 goal ahead and you see out a game and see out another game and see out another game and see out another game, you know, does that give you the confidence in a scenario, in the same scenario, that you can do it again, basically? Because what Bournemouth did, we had periods of possession, by the way, in those last sort of 15 minutes and injury time, excuse me. But when Bournemouth did have it, they sort of went against type in that they just launched the ball forward. There was a lot of long ball stuff from them, which isn't really how they play. And I think Arsenal dealt with it all pretty comfortably.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, to be fair to Mikel Arteta, he kind of spoke about these narrow leads in these terms. I think it was after the Brighton game. When he spoke about, here it is, I don't want to lose what I have. We have to play to continue to score and show that composure and that ability. I can't find it specifically.
Is it the one where he's asked about, like, do you view it as sustainable? And he said, yes, from my side it is. That's what he said. I remember that.
Exactly, yeah. And he basically spoke about the composure and the organisation and the calmness that Arsenal showed in that situation, and he sort of took that as a model, a learning moment, and I think you can see that in action here, because I think Arsenal managed that situation superbly.
Yeah,
really.
I mean, Bournemouth didn't have a shot. They'd one blocked shot, so they didn't really have any dangerous moments. Of course, you're always on the edge a little bit with that 1-goal lead. We had 5 shots in the last 15 minutes after Bournemouth scored. We had 55% possession to their 45. So it wasn't a case that we just said, right, come on, we'll just sit in and let you have all the ball and deal with whatever you have. I think part of the way that we dealt with those last 15 odd minutes was to have a lot of the ball in their half as well.
That said, Andrew, we did have to contend with something that I've never seen before from Amin Adli.
Already on a yellow card, by the way.
Already on a yellow card. Is this the first ever Premier League use of the kamikaze striker? I mean, it was... He charged into Gabriel's elbow, Andrew. Yeah. I don't know any other way to say it.
There is no other way to say it. He sort of stooped down into Gabriel's elbow and then went down as if, he had been elbowed. I suppose on the one hand, you have to kind of applaud the endeavour. But
the ingenuity.
On the other hand, it's like, dude, come on, relax here.
Do you think on the touchline, when he's coming on, they're like, and if you get the chance, I mean, if you even catch sight of one of those defenders' elbows, you know what you must do.
Run headfirst into it while, leaning down, stooping
risking
into the
concussion or worse.
Listen,
putting his body on the line.
Desperate times call for desperate measures. I understand.
Well, this was maybe one of the most desperate measures I've ever seen in a Premier League game.
Me too, because I don't, we've been watching football a long time, both of us, and I don't think I can ever remember anyone doing anything quite like that. Certainly not in the Premier League. It was bizarre. But look, that maybe
was there
told
any
you
fear in your mind that a referee might fall for it?
Well, yeah, of course. This is the PGMOL, Howard Webb on his phone just immediately calling up the VAR going, yeah, better give a penalty
Looked
for
a
that.
pen to me. There's definitely contact.
Yeah. I suppose that told you a bit about how desperate Bournemouth were at that point.
Because nothing was working. Should have been sent off for that.
I think you could make a good case that kind of gamesmanship is worthy of a yellow card. But, do I care one way or the other at this point? No, not really. If it happens a bit earlier in the game, I'm probably asking a bigger question about that.
Yeah.
But, there were moments in this game where I think, certainly Bournemouth at the end were not happy with the way the final whistle was blown. They had a long throw.
Very unhappy.
They had a long throw. The ball came back out to Semenyo. I will say it is unusual for a referee to blow the whistle on the second phase of an attacking play.
Yeah.
So I do kind of get it, but at the same time, we just talked about this dude trying to headbutt Gabriel's elbow, and 2 minutes earlier, up the other end of the pitch, there was a rugby tackle on Gabriel Jesus, which went completely and utterly unpunished. And I can't believe that it wasn't unseen. So it went unpunished. It was as obvious a grab around the leg as you could possibly see. That's a foul on Gabriel Jesus, which would have allowed us to keep the ball higher up the pitch. They probably wouldn't get that throw in. So, it all balances out in the end.
Yeah, I was a bit surprised it was as many as 6 minutes when the board went up. I think Arsenal ate up a fair bit of that 6 minutes, taking a couple of set pieces, maybe a throw in and a goal kick. I could understand them adding a bit more on. It was a little unusual, but it's the referee's discretion. If it's full-time, it's full-time. Had it happened at the other end and we were chasing an equaliser, I would have been absolutely furious. I would have stormed out of the press box onto the pitch and throttled the guy. But fortunately, it didn't.
Okay, well, listen, you've set down the marker here for what's to happen at some point in the future. So we'll keep you to that. The listeners keep the receipts, James, as well. So if this goes south on us at some point later in the season, we expect you to step up and hold true to your word. But look, seriously though, it's a really important win, a really big win. It's a tricky place to go. We lost there last season, albeit in slightly contentious fashion because of the red card that was handed to William Saliba, which makes life very difficult for you. But this is another game this season where we're up on the corresponding result from last time out.
Yeah, absolutely, and made all the bigger, I suppose, by the Manchester City results, which sandwich it.
That's 2 in a row now. Arsenal have played twice. City and won, by the way. Arsenal played twice and won, and City have drawn their games. I don't think it's entirely down to the fact that we put pressure on them, but I do feel like if the roles were reversed in that sense, there would be greater discussion of how Arsenal are buckling under the pressure of the title challenge from Manchester City. We've gone over this, and it's up to us to sort of change that narrative by ultimately winning this league, right? That will change how people talk about you and how they view you in a sort of title race or in the contention for a title. But, if we'd done what City had done, there'd be cracked cannons all over the fucking place, wouldn't there?
Yeah, quite. Absolutely. And I actually don't think a point at Sunderland was necessarily a disaster for City. Lest we forget, we got a point at Sunderland ourselves, and I seem to remember when we spoke about it afterwards, we said that other good teams will drop points there. It's a tough place to go, and they're a decent outfit. But I think at home to a managerless Chelsea, having drawn with Sunderland, they really ought to have won that one.
Yeah.
And especially having been in front going into the dying moments. I mean, holding on to a 1-goal lead isn't for everyone, guys.
Well, listen, we've become good at it for the most part, and hopefully that can continue in those tight scenarios. But hopefully, too, when you look across the last couple of games, it's 4 goals against Villa, 3 goals against a Bournemouth side who've only lost once previously at home until the other day. Their home record.
Don't many at home at all.
No, their home record versus their away record this season, as we talked about on the preview podcast, is chalk and cheese. So this is a big win, and like you say, I think if you're going to be on the other end of a big mistake, as you say, a freak defensive error, and a really, really good piece of play, a really good goal that you can't really do a whole lot about, scoring 3, well, that's how you do it. That's how you win the games, and that's, a big part of how you go on and win titles. And I think sort of days like yesterday, with like all due respect to Bournemouth, and I mean that, I think they're sort of looked at in the end when things play out, and if they play out in your favour, people look at those games as sort of like, well, they're the bread and butter of a title-winning season. Those are the games that you have to go and win. And it doesn't mean that you're entitled to it or that you absolutely, are going to do it just because Bournemouth are a smaller club, whatever. But these are the games, and these are the days where, you give yourself a really great opportunity to go the distance, because they're tough games, tough opponents, and, they build the points tally, but they also build confidence and belief and momentum. And I think Saturday was a really good example of that for me.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, I actually was thinking last night, if Arsenal do go on to win this Premier League, I wonder how important this little period over the last few weeks will come to be considered within that. Although it's been sort of torturous watching at times these narrow leads, these narrow advantages, and having to kind of hold out in the final moments. When you look at the games in the league after losing at Villa Park, the 2-1 win over Wolves, the 1-0 at Everton, the 2-1 at home to Brighton, I think Arsenal against Villa is kind of a bit of an exception in that, we absolutely smashed them 4-1, but then the 3-2 at Bournemouth. For so many of those games as well, we were without key defenders, right? And having to sort of patch together different back lines, and having got over the line and achieved maximum points in that situation.
Yeah.
I actually don't think it's beyond the realms of possibility that we look back and see that as the period in which the title was won. Like, if you look at the fact that City have dropped points across that period as well, and those are games where, in many instances, we dropped points last season.
Mm-hmm.
And frankly, I think in previous seasons would have dropped points in those situations with those injuries, trying to hold those leads. The fact that we've managed that period so maturely and achieved results, maximum results, in spite of some of the obstacles we've come across, is just so important. And I think it may come to be seen as more important than games where we've necessarily been free-flowing and winning, 2 or 3-0 and comfortable. Grinding these results out might be the difference.
Yeah, I couldn't help but think of the 23-24 season, where in December we had a couple of games that you could look back on as critical in that title race. The home game to West Ham where we had 500 shots and ended up losing 2-0. The game against Fulham on New Year's Eve where we went ahead but lost 2-1. You can look across the league season and say, well, look, it could have been that result, it could have been this result, that draw, this defeat, whatever it was. And there weren't too many of those, actually, in the course of that 23-24 season. And I remember looking at this fixture list and thinking, there's a couple of slight banana skins in there when it comes to our fixtures over December. Brighton, a very good team. Villa, a good team. Villa as well at home, having to respond to being beaten by Villa in the way that we lost to that Villa, or the way we lost that Villa game, by the way, I think is another thing that doesn't quite go or get as much coverage as it should, because that's a kick in the balls, like a proper run-up kick in the balls to lose that game against Aston Villa. And if you've ever been kicked in the balls, it takes you a little bit of time to get going again. And
it happened to me. My 2-year-old did it to me the other day.
Right.
It was more of a stamp than a kick, actually.
All right.
But it was a reminder of, what.
Well,
what
there you go. You
like.
feel that pain. You've experienced that metaphorically and physically, and the Arsenal team did too. And then we've won 7 games in a row. One of them with a penalty shootout, of course. That's a huge response, I think, and I think it says a lot about the character of the team and the determination of the team, and also the quality of the team that we have available to us.
Yeah, I agree, and I think determination has been a huge part of it. I think that's my sort of overriding feeling when I watch this team at the moment. I just feel like there is such a steely focus on the task at hand. And it's enabling us to kind of maintain this level of competition across all fronts, which is obviously really, really exciting.
Yeah. Okay. Well, listen, we've got loads of questions as well, sort of following on from the Bournemouth game, and also about certain individuals. So what we'll do is we'll take a little break here, and we'll come back with your questions and more in part 2 right after this. Welcome back to the Arsecast Extra. This is part 2 of the show where we answer the questions that you send to us on Blue Sky at gunnerblog.bsky.social and at arseblog.com. Also on the Arseblog Discord chat server, which you get access to if you are an Arseblog member on Patreon. Right, James, I will say there have been millions of questions. Well, not millions, but lots of questions about Ethan Nwaneri today. Because, what?
Who's that?
Ethan.
Don't remember. I can't remember last time I saw the boy.
Ethan Nwaneri. Okay?
Right.
You remember him. Yes, so he wasn't in the squad. He wasn't in the squad. And there's a bit of angst about that. And there's also maybe a bit of angst about Eberechi Eze not playing much of late as well. But AB Gunner on the Discord says, "Goodly morning, lads. Am I the only one not worried about Ethan or Eze's minutes? I believe both will eventually play a lot, even if not this season, though I think Eze will. But both could be Premier League champions, which I don't think we should underestimate as a career goal for them, and something keeping them motivated and working hard rather than being disgruntled and disengaged."
I really do think there's 2 ways of looking at this. I mean, as I said in part 1, it is kind of an illustration of the depth and quality at Arsenal's disposal. And, a situation which we've just spoken about, the amount of narrow leads Arsenal have been protecting. And either of those players necessarily ones who you would choose to bring on to protect a narrow lead? I think you could argue no. On Ethan specifically, I think I said it on here a couple of weeks ago, I am an advocate for a loan for Ethan. I think loaning Ethan is actually the best thing for Arsenal Football Club. And I think that because I believe we have the depth to cope without him. And I think what it could do for his development over the next few months is massive. I think it could see him really, really step up a level or two and return to Arsenal as a player who Mikel Arteta considers like a serious contender for a first team place. Because I think we've got a huge talent on our hands there. And I'm sure he's working hard in training, and I'm sure he's learning lots in training. But kind of the history of football kind of dictates that what really matters is time on the pitch, minutes on the pitch, opportunity to play first team football, senior football. And I think he would benefit. I think it would be a smart move from Arsenal. And I think we should be looking to facilitate it.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. I think others have pointed out, and Lewis has pointed out, that Nwaneri has, played more minutes for Arsenal at 18 years of age than Bukayo Saka did. Has played more for Arsenal than Phil Foden did for Manchester City at the same age. I genuinely, as much as I think there's a player of real potential in there, and there absolutely is, and he's so exciting to watch, I don't think it's abnormal that he's not involved in the squad when we have as many players fit as we do. Like, I don't think it's anything out of the ordinary for an 18-year-old not to make the squad ahead of a Brazilian international in Gabriel Jesus, a Spanish international in Mikel Merino, an England international in the shape of Eberechi Eze. You know, when you get Kai Havertz back, someone else is going to have to miss out, you know. So I don't think it's out of the ordinary. I don't think he's being treated badly. I think he is just a victim of the squad depth that we talked about in the first half of the show, and that everyone is on board with, right? We want that squad depth. We want to be able to cope with injuries. We want to be able to be change games, etc., etc. And there are always going to be some players who are peripheral when you have a squad that big. And ultimately, he is only 18, and he is still learning his trade. And they're not viewing him as a right winger, as they did last season. They didn't really have any choice, obviously, because Bukayo Saka was out. And when you look at the players that he's competing with, whether it's Odegaard, Eze, Merino, could be Havertz at times, you know, I don't think this is unusual for him to be out of the team. I don't necessarily think it's anything to be particularly worried about, but I do think, and I agree with you, that we're at a point where he would really benefit from minutes. So let me just follow that up with a question from Angard Away, who says, is Ethan Nwaneri going out on loan? If so, what kind of team would you like him to join? A strong team in an allegedly weaker league in order to improve his confidence and attacking instincts, or a middling team in the Premier League to improve his defensive, physical and tactical skills?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I mean, I sort of feel like those attributes of teams are not necessarily mutually exclusive. You know, I don't know is the answer. I mean, I could see him going to, I think I mentioned the Bundesliga before, somewhere where a lot of young English talents have really thrived and flourished. But I suppose, what do we want? We want him to come back a player that Arteta is prepared to use, right? We want him to come back a player who's ready for what Mikel's going to demand of him. So I suppose within the Premier League, you'd be looking at teams that you feel have a kind of tactical model that shares some parallels.
Does it really matter? You know, does it really matter if he gets Premier League minutes or Liga minutes or Bundesliga minutes?
I mean, even Jack Wilshere went to Bolton, right? You know,
at 18, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it wasn't Sam Allardyce's Bolton. I believe it was Owen Coyle's Bolton at the time, who were slightly more kind of expansive in their football ideology.
Less Bolton than you would imagine. Yeah.
Yeah. But I actually think what will benefit him most is just the minutes. I mean, I always remember Alex Song went to Charlton and came back a totally different player. And it's not because Charlton are kind of the Barcelona of South London or anything like it. It was just that sort of playing week in, week out changed him. It made him a man, to use some sort of old-fashioned terminology. And he returned a totally different player. And I sort of think we can debate kind of the tactical model, the position he plays, but I actually don't think anything will do Ethan as much good as being on the team sheet every week.
Yeah.
I just think being in that first team environment, playing every week, have the pressure of having to win, having to perform, having to, you know, keep his place, be riding those challenges, you know, 90 minutes, week in, week out, I just think would do him the world of good.
There was some chat about Bournemouth, wasn't there, actually being interested?
Well, Bournemouth would be a fit. I mean, when you're talking about teams who have tactical models that, I'm not saying they're the same as Arsenal, but they share certain sort of principles or ideas, Bournemouth would be on there. You know, Brighton could well be on there. And I think Arsenal, again, it's not really how it works. When you've got a first-team player like this, typically if they go out on loan, it's because somebody wants them but can't buy them or can't afford the fee. I think Arsenal could be a bit proactive here. I think they could look at the league and say, who are the right teams? What are the right places? You know, is there a benefit to him staying in London? Is there a benefit to him leaving London and going and playing his football somewhere different, you know, and having to kind of be independent and step outside of that. I'm not saying comfort zone, but what he's known since he was a young boy. All these things are on the table. And I think a lot of clubs would jump at the chance to have an Ethan Nwaneri for 6 months.
Sure.
I mean, do you think that this debate, this scrutiny, this attention that's paid to Ethan's situation is sort of a consequence of maybe like an unrealistic degree of expectation given how much he played last season? Like, I know there are all those stats about, he's played a lot for an 18-year-old, but how much is that skewed by the fact that we had a massive injury crisis and probably not enough depth the season before?
Absolutely. I think that's exactly it. They were, both Lewis Skelly and Ethan Nwaneri, I think, were pressed into action ahead of schedule, or certainly ahead of where, typically a young player starts to make a breakthrough, because we needed them. We needed Lewis Skelly at left back, and we needed Ethan Nwaneri when Bukayo Saka got injured. And to be fair, he stepped up, nearly got himself into double figures for goals. I think that's part of it as well. People saw that he can hit a ball maybe in a way that nobody else in this Arsenal team does, really. And that's a quality you want to have in your team or around your team. But yeah, I don't know if it's unrealistic, but they were there, they played. There's a lot of hope and optimism. There's the fact that we're looking at them to follow in the footsteps of Bukayo Saka, players who've come through the Hale End Academy. I think that adds an aspect to it as well, where there's a romantic element to a kid, or two kids, by the way, who grew up at Arsenal side by side. We've all seen the pictures, et cetera, and making their breakthrough in the same season. But when you look at it realistically, one of them is 18, one of them is 19, and look at the players that they're competing with. So do you want Arsenal to be the best it can possibly be and the most competitive team it can be? If that's yes, then you're going to compete with an Italian international. You're going to compete with an Ecuadorian international. Nwaneri's going to have to compete with all the players that I mentioned previously. You don't just sort of, look, these kids have come through, let's just make room for them now because it's a nice idea. That's not how the professional game works, There is an element of sink or swim when it comes to professional football. Timing and luck and opportunity and all those things play a part. But I think ultimately you have to go and earn your place, and I'm not being in any way dismissive of Nwaneri or indeed Miles Lewis-Skelly, but I think what we're seeing for two players of their age is pretty normal when you have a squad like the squad Arsenal have at their disposal.
Yeah, and I think because of certain exceptional individuals, it's sort of easy to think that the development of a footballer is always a linear progress, a linear journey. I made 25 appearances last season, so I'll make 35 this season. But it doesn't necessarily follow that route. It can be a bit more circuitous than that to get to the destination. And I think as well, when you talk about the players they're competing with, Lewis Skelly and Nwaneri, you have to look at the ages of the players they're competing with.
Yes, prime age players.
Prime age. And you have to look at the signings Arsenal made this summer, predominantly prime age, right? And Gyökeres 27, Eze 27. We've had teams populated with 18 and 19-year-olds before, and they haven't won too many titles, to be frank with you. And I think it's very evident to me from the transfer strategy in the summer that a decision was made about Arsenal requiring maturity at this point to get them over the line. And that has had a knock-on effect for Nwaneri and Lewis Skelly. I must say, listening to Arteta the other day, talking about Nwaneri, he didn't sound like a man about to let him go. He kind of said this is a challenge for him and something he needs to overcome. I do think there will be a reluctance to let anybody go. Especially at a time now, arguably, and I think this may relate to Eze when we come on to talk about him, we're at a point where there's some games coming up that you'd think some of these players who haven't had opportunities may well get them in. I'm thinking of, obviously, there's two legs of a Carabao semi-final. There's the
FA
Kairat
Cup.
Almaty game in the Champions League. There's the Portsmouth game in the FA Cup in just a few days' time. So do you think it's likely that, say, on Nwaneri, a decision won't be made until those games have come and gone and we've seen his involvement in those?
Yeah, maybe so. Maybe so. You know, and I think as well, I would imagine there is you got to find that balance, don't you, between, challenging a player and then doing what's best for their development. I do think, given the way we've been hit with injuries, not just this season, but previously, I wonder if Arteta will look at, keeping his squad as big as possible. And if the consequence of that is we win the title, but there's some guys who haven't played very much, I think he will be more than willing to deal with a few disgruntled knocks on his door in that scenario.
Yeah. And the question alluded to, I think, an interesting consideration in this, which is like, yes, players want to play, but how much do players want to be part of a title-winning campaign as well? Like, is it a worthwhile sacrifice for someone like Ethan Nwaneri to accept, I'm not really going to get a great many opportunities in the Premier League unless there's an injury crisis, but I am going to pick up a Premier League medal in Arsenal's first title in more than 20 years. Yeah. So it's not straightforward. I feel like, did the question touched on Eze, did it as well? Well, I feel like that's almost a separate one, right? Because I think he's in such a different situation and such a different point in his career. So what do you make of his ongoing omission?
I don't know. Tim wrote a really good piece for the blog last week about Eze, and I'll put a link to that in the show notes. I think it's a bit strange that he hasn't played very much in the last 3 or 4 games. Arteta was talking about, well, look how many minutes he's played so far this season, etc., which I get as well. I think certain game states might play a part in that. But then, you look at the Villa game. Could he have come on in the Villa game when we're 4-0 up? Maybe that's a game where
I didn't fully buy that from Mikel, I have to say.
No, me neither. Yeah.
I get it. And he has played, he had a lot of kind of 3 games weeks when Odegaard was out. So it's not baseless, but I just didn't fully go.
I can't help but think back to the Villa game and just that moment where he switched off against Matty Cash. And listen, I don't know for sure. I don't have any information on this. I just wonder if this is a little bit of a man management. Is that the right way to put it? Where, like, he started the next game against Wolves, by the way, in fairness. Wasn't a great performance from the team that night, and he came off around the hour mark. But since then, is it just a little reminder from Mikel Arteta to an experienced player that, listen, the stakes are so high this season that we need you and everybody else. It's not a personal thing, but we need you to be switched on 100% at all times. Mikel Arteta was very, very, very happy with Eberechi Eze when he scored a hat-trick against Spurs. So I don't think it's a case that, like, he's now, well, fuck that guy. But I do think there might be an element of, listen, if you make a small error like that and it costs us a goal, and maybe that costs us 3 points on the day, or certainly a point on the day, let's say, in a title race this tight, that could be the difference between winning it and losing it. Next time you play, you're really going to have to be 100% in terms of concentration, that kind of stuff. I think game states, in a certain sense, have had an impact. But like I said, the game against Villa, when it's 4-0, can he come on there? I think he definitely can,
Yeah. I think, and like Ethan, I think there are games coming up that he could well play. Are they the games he'd picked for himself? Perhaps not. I mean, I think it will all work out, to borrow a lyric from Eze's unveiling video. But I remember when, Arsenal were first linked with Eze, or when I would sort of speculate or optimistically hope that he might well come to Arsenal, I did always think I wouldn't necessarily describe him as a Mikel Arteta player. I did always think that there would have to be a kind of a meeting of minds and a sort of compromising between those two individuals, because they sort of, in broad terms, I think they represent quite different sort of footballing philosophies. And I think what we're seeing probably is that process happening, where it's not going to work for Eze to just be the free spirit that he was at Palace. That's probably not going to work for Mikel Arteta. And equally, it's not going to work for Eze for him to turn into some sort of, dogged, defensive-minded second fullback out on the wing. There's going to have to be a way in which these two kind of come to terms with each other's ideas and find a way to work together. And I think we're just sort of in that sticky bit. And I'm sort of fascinated to see how they come through it and what we get out the other side. I suspect we'll see Eze play on Sunday against Portsmouth. We might well see him again in the Carabao game on Wednesday. I'm very curious to see what version of Eberechi Eze we see and how he and Arteta mesh, because they're going to need to.
Isn't it basically the same thing as him saying about Ethan Nwaneri, he's got to rise to the challenge? It's the same thing now for Eze. He's got to respond to this period, in his short Arsenal career so far, where he's been out of the team for 3 or 4 games. And that's it. That's it. It's not the end of the world. I'm not overly worried, I have to say, but it is a challenge for him. And like you, I'm really, really curious to see how it plays out. And I think from what we understand of Eberechi Eze and the character that he has and the self-belief that he has and the determination that he has to make it, as a footballer first and foremost, but to come full circle to Arsenal, does anyone think he's going to just sort of sit in his hands now and say, I don't think so. I don't think so. So I don't worry too much. And if it's part of some Arteta master plan to light a fire under Eberechi Eze that bears fruit in the second half of the season, then it's a little piece of managerial genius, I guess. I don't know, but we'll see how it plays out.
We will indeed.
I think it's your question.
I suppose there are other questions and other things we could talk about. What about this from Fido Mido on the Discord? And they say, barring a disaster, do you see any reason to spend in the transfer window? I know Mikel Arteta has suggested that Arsenal are actively looking, but with key players coming back from injury and squad harmony being a delicate thing, there's surely no way the Cronkies can be convinced, given Arsenal's strong position in both the league and the Champions League. No?
I think that's right. I would not be interested in Arsenal signing anyone in January, to be honest. I don't think we need to. I think, we've built a really strong squad. Look where we are in the league. Look where we are in the Champions League. I just don't see the need. I think you can always look at a squad and say, well, can we improve there? Can we improve there? If a huge improvement comes on the market and there's an opportunity, I think every football club, well, certainly every manager in public is going to say, well, if the opportunity is there, we've got to be active because we're a big club, et cetera, right? But that's kind of what they're all going to say. They're not going to give anything away publicly with regards to transfers. I don't see anything on the market right now in January that would make me go, you know what, let's bring that guy in and cast that guy aside. I think there is an element of squad harmony. I think Arsenal have been quite cognizant of maintaining a level of harmony within the squad, not just with how they built it, but I think the Trossard situation, right? Where he was given a pay rise in the summer. He wasn't given an extension, but he was given a pay rise, which I think was a response to, where he was when we signed him, what he's done for the club since, and maybe where the sort of the bar has been raised below him, right? When it comes to certain salaries and contracts that have been given out to players. I think that was a really deliberate way to ensure that you avoid disharmony within the squad, by giving Trossard a pay rise. And I think Trossard, by the way, has 100% delivered on that pay rise. I think he delivered to get that pay rise, and he's delivered since then as well. So I think there's no real call for any arrival in January, as the question said, barring a disaster. And I, clearly and very obviously hope that that isn't the case, because we just don't need that.
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree. I don't, there used to be this idea talked about of kind of the Esprit effect. You'll remember, of course.
Well, explain it for, maybe some people who weren't around.
Like
yeah, exactly. Or,
Newcastle, I think it was in, let's get my years right, certainly the mid-90s. I'm trying to figure out if it was 96 or 97. He signed for Newcastle in February 1996. So this was in the days before the transfer window was in operation in the Premier League. So you could sign anyone at any time up until about 6 weeks before the end of the season, at which point there was a transfer deadline. And Newcastle signed Esprit in February of 1996, at a time when they are sort of flying high at the top of the Premier League table.
12 points clear, is that right, at that point?
They had been 12 points clear. I think by the time he actually joined, that had been narrowed a little bit. Anyway, while Esprit was an incredibly exciting player, I mean, he was a big arrival for the Premier League. He came from Parma, where he'd been part of like a brilliant team featuring, Gianfranco Zola and I think maybe Thomas Brolin and one or two others. He was a proper star signing that sort of elevated Newcastle further still. And yet, I think he came at a time when they had a very established attack based around Les Ferdinand and I think Alan Shearer at that point in time. And it basically unsettled them, really. The integration of Esprit was cited as one of the issues that led to them not winning the Premier League that season ultimately. So that was kind of, that's when people talk about the Esprit effect, I guess that's what they are referring to. The idea that even an exciting signing at a midpoint in the season can have a kind of destabilising effect. Now, I think even the most ambitious Arsenal fan would not necessarily come into January looking for that kind of marquee arrival. I think everyone recognises that our spending was done in the summer.
Yeah.
And Arsenal went above and beyond, really, expectations to deliver Mikel Arteta a squad capable of winning a Premier League and withstanding the various challenges that come within that. Maybe people would be looking at, could we bring in a backup somewhere? I just don't see the need right now. Obviously, injuries can change that, and fingers crossed they don't. But I think Arsenal have more than enough cover, and they've shown that by the way they've withstood various injuries already this season. I also think we've got to talk about it from a financial perspective too, and recognise that a vast amount of money was spent in the summer.
Yeah.
And it's not just about ambition and what the owners are prepared to back and put in support. Arsenal have to operate within financial parameters dictated by rules, by competitions, by the Premier League, by UEFA.
Yeah.
And they want to as well be in a position in the summer to be ambitious again, right? To go again and do exciting things. And even if Arsenal ultimately win the Premier League, in some respects, people can say that's the most important time to take strides forward and not sit on your laurels and, use that advantage to kind of improve the squad further. And I think to do that might require us to be a little bit more conservative in January. So at this point in time, I'm not expecting any significant first team arrivals in this month at all. I'm sure there'll be other work that goes on, in terms of building out the academy sides and future prospects and things like that. And I'm sure that there is already work going on regarding the summer because the need to improve never stops.
Just having a little moment's silence here for the Transfer gurus, the aggregators.
Hey, listen, look, I've been wrong before many times, and circumstances can change things. And, maybe a couple of players do agitate to go out, and then, does that change things? Do you get a few injuries? But I can't. See. It's just my kind of objective view. I can't see a pressing need.
No,
right now.
Me neither. Okay, here's a question from Bellsgoal, bellsgoal.bsky.social. And they ask, when we bought Declan Rice, did you think he would have the impact and be as important as he is? And did you think the improvement in his game would be as good as it has been?
I don't want to just be a wanker, but I sort of think yes. I kind of think it was such a he was such a sure thing. Like I keep coming back to it, but like he would have been, in my view, a brilliant signing wherever he went. And that was why I was so determined that Pep didn't get hold of him and City didn't get hold of him, because I knew what he would take there. I knew what he would bring. I think maybe on the improvement, like, did I anticipate him becoming a sort of David Beckham-esque dead ball deliverer? No, I did not. I did not see those corners being part of his game.
Did you see him playing where he's playing? Because I agree with you. I think, you look at every transfer and you go, that's a good signing. But I can't ever remember thinking a player is going to fit and bring just exactly what we need to a team in the way that Declan Rice has.
Well,
but it was more about the six, though. It was like, he's going to be a defensive midfield. He's going to anchor that midfield. This is what he does. We're going to play with a freedom, and he's going to allow others to do this, that, and the other. And then, hang on, he's sort of playing as an 8 now, a more all-round midfielder. He's a more all-round midfielder than I thought he was going to be, despite the fact I thought there was no chance whatsoever that this would be a bad deal or that we in any way overpaid for him, even though it was over 100 million quid.
Yeah. I think we have to remember that as much as he looked a sure thing and has proven himself to be a sure thing, this summer's transfer window demonstrates that there aren't really any sure things in football. I mean, Alexander Isak, signing of Alexander Isak, looked like an obvious one, right? And many Arsenal fans were convinced that he would make a tremendous impact wherever he went. And it hasn't come to pass for a variety of different factors, not all of which are in his hands. But I think that shows you that nothing is certain in football when it comes to transfers. There is this kind of curious alchemy. And actually, I think as much as Declan Rice deserves enormous credit for what he has produced, and Arteta spoke on Saturday night about the way in which he continually adds things to his game, like a computer game character sort of climbing a skill tree. He's just adding more and more attributes. I think Arsenal deserve credit too, because they have proven to be a great environment for him. And I think he came into a club which has stability, which had a coach who really understood and believed in him, who was prepared to be flexible in his ideas about how he used him. I mean, Declan Rice was absolutely bought to be the number 6 in this system. Kai Havertz, none of these things are ever set in stone. No one, writes it down like a kind of 10 commandments. It is going to be like this. But, there was a whiteboard somewhere that had Declan Rice at number 6 and Kai Havertz as a left 8 in front of it. And Mikel Arteta, as much as we talk about him as a kind of a stubborn man, a man very sort of fixed on his ideas, he was prepared to recognise a few months into that season that wasn't the way it was going. That actually the best thing for the team was for Kai Havertz to be a centre forward and for Declan Rice to be this kind of irrepressible box-to-box midfielder. And in fact, he ultimately followed it up with the signing of Martin Zubimendi, which sort of cemented that decision.
Yeah.
I think the one thing you can say is that was absolutely the right call. Like, Declan Rice can be a number 6, but it just feels like such a shame to lose the full extent of the dynamism that he brings in midfield. And he does. I kind of knew it would be a good signing. I thought it would be a great signing, but he still does surprise me with, some of what he brings. And I just overall, I feel very lucky that we have him, and I feel very pleased and proud that Arsenal took the plunge, because we're not a club with a great history of going out and spending £100 million on footballers. And he was kind of, I think we forget now because we've seen massive expenditure since he came in as well. But it was a bit of a departure for us to go and do that and go and take another Premier League player who was already so established, an England international, to beat Manchester City of all clubs to his signature. I think that was a huge moment in the recent history of this football club. And again, if we do win the Premier League, I think it's another key sort of milestone along the way that we'll look back to.
I mean, I think you're absolutely right, because he's an amazing player, but I think the cocktail, if you like, of him being an amazing player, coming in his prime years, coming into an environment which suits him, a coach that suits him, all of that has helped get the very best out of Declan Rice. And I think what we're seeing is, a player of the season candidate in front of our eyes. And I don't just mean the Arsenal player of the season. I mean the Premier League player of the season. He's been that good and that consistent. And I'm while you were talking there, I was thinking about that summer where we were all like 99% sure that he was going to sign for Arsenal, because that was the talk for so many weeks and months before that. But this Manchester City thing would not go away. And there was like, well, why do Manchester City need him? They've already got Rodri. Why do they need another one? And then you sort of think about what Manchester City might have been like with Rodri at the 6 and Declan Rice at the 8. And it's like, well, you might as well all just have gone home at that point, So I think it's massive for Arsenal. I think what we're seeing as well, we talked about this with regards to Leandro Trossard a couple of weeks ago, maybe last week or the week before, about how he's at a point where, he knows he hasn't got too many more chances to win the Premier League, and that's part of what's driving his form this season. You mentioned the ages of some of the players that we have. Declan Rice, 27, Eze, 27, Zubimendi's 26, Martin Odegaard is 27 now. These guys are at a point where they've got to win. They've got to win something, and I think that's really apparent in the way that Declan Rice is playing this season, the way he's grown on the pitch and maybe off the pitch, but certainly in terms of his leadership and the way that he is imposing himself on this Arsenal team. And I mean that in the really most positive way that you can mean it, right? Talked in the Wolves game, didn't we, about how he was really not happy with players around him at certain points in that game, and he's not afraid to let those people know about it. And I think that the leadership, the sort of ferocity with which he plays every single game is part of the drive for the title this season. And listen, we've got a long way to go. We really do. And we're in a great position, but a lot can happen between now and May. But I'm thinking about that kind of attitude within the squad, that we have got to get it over the line for our own sakes. Individually and collectively, I feel like there is such a desire. It's kind of what's underpinning my belief in this team, a part of it anyway. There are other aspects to it, but I think that, from the likes of Rice and from Odegaard and from Eze and from Trossard and from these guys, who want to make up for these close calls that they've had, I think it is a real key driver for this team.
Definitely. We spoke about determination. I just feel with Declan Rice that he's playing like somebody who will not be denied. And when he's in that mood, I don't think there's anyone who can sort of live with him, go stride for stride with him. I think he will win the Player of the Year this year. I think he will be the Footballer of the Year in the Premier League. And if he is, it will mean Arsenal have had a great season. So fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed. Is it me or you? Or
I think it's me. I was just sort of so lost in my reverie for Declan Rice that I forgot about having to do the podcast.
Were you kissing your TV even though Declan Rice is not on the other end of it?
Kissing my computer screen, actually. Yeah. I actually had a load of sort of Nwaneri and Eze questions that I think we've really covered. That was kind of my lot. And I also had the Declan Rice one.
What about this one then? Before we go, we might as well do one more. And okay. I've got a couple of quick ones to see us out. Joss W. Bennett on the Discord. Curious to hear your thoughts on Hincapie so far. He's played 14 times, almost equally between centre-back and left-back. Undoubtedly been an important player, but I can't help feeling he's a weak link defensively. He seems to get involved in a lot, but then switch off at crucial moments. See Kroupi, Watkins running off him, or become too focused on wrestling to focus on the ball. Am I the arsehole, or is he just learning? Are our standards too high because of Gabriel, Saliba and Timber?
I'm not sure yet, to be honest with you, is how I feel about Hincapie. I'm sorry that's such a boring answer, but I'm not wholly convinced one way or the other. I feel like I'm still learning about him. At centre-half, he's had good games. I feel like he can be a bit impetuous and a bit rash. I think he's quite emotional, which feels like a characteristic that many of this team have sort of left behind them a little bit.
Gabriel, for example, was similar, wasn't he? At a similar age when he came in at 22, he was a very, very. I mean, he's still an emotional guy, but it's about how you.
I think he's
channel that. Yeah,
now.
exactly.
Yeah. As a fullback, I find him a little bit one-dimensional as compared to Ricardo Calafiori, for example. But then, aren't we all? As compared to Ricardo Calafiori. But, there were times against Bournemouth where it was kind of push and run overlap play. And I was sort of like, there is a time for this and there is a value in it. But I don't think it can compete with the kind of flexibility of threat that someone like Calafiori offers. But then that's an incredibly high bar to meet.
Based on this season and Calafiori's form this season, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So I basically feel... I think he sort of looks kind of what he is right now, which is, I think he looks like a very competent, pretty reliable deputy for our first choices in those positions. I've not yet seen enough to suggest... When he arrived, I thought there was quite a good chance he could become the first choice, maybe at left back. But if Calafiori continues at the level that he's shown for the majority of this season and can stay fit, I think Hincapie will find that very difficult to displace. But there'll be lots of games,
sure,
for everybody. I'd be interested. What's your view so far?
Again, I sort of feel like it's a bit too soon. Like the sample size is too small to really make a definitive judgment one way or the other. I think we have to
two positions, which makes it hard.
Yeah, of course. And he's coming in from the Bundesliga. We've seen more high-profile players come in from the Bundesliga and struggle to make an impact in the Premier League this season. I think as a defender, you're always under the spotlight as well. You can miss a chance, and you miss a chance. You make a mistake at the back, and it sort of reflects badly on you as an individual. I think what I would say is when he signed, I looked at him and thought, right, this sort of fits a bit more with the physical profile of defender that I connect with Mikel Arteta more than Miles Lewis-Skelly, which isn't to criticise Lewis-Skelly, right? But if you look across the back line, fullbacks like Ben White, like Jurrien Timber, 6-foot guys basically, who can play at centre-half as well. Calafiori, he can play centre-half. Hincapie can play centre-half. Miles Lewis-Skelly can't play centre-half. He is a more traditional-sized left back, right? So that was where my mind went. I think he's only 14 games into a career at a new club, so needs a bit of time. And I think, probably benefits from the fact that he was a late signing and he wasn't a signing, let's say, that everybody absolutely said we needed. Therefore, he's not under the same kind of spotlight as Victor Gyökeres, for example, who's only the same number of games into his Arsenal career as Hincapie, but he's far more in the spotlight because of the nature of his signing and the nature of his role. So,
yeah, I think that's a good point. I mean, two further things. One is that when he signed, one thing that I heard was that the deal was done partly kind of on the premise that, or the expectation that Eze would be playing quite a lot on the left-hand side. So it was seen that there might be a kind of relationship between those two things. And ultimately that hasn't really come to pass, to be honest. So yeah, I that's just one thing to note. And the other thing is to say that as we enter the second half of the season, he is one of the very few players in this Arsenal squad who has won a league title, having done so with Bayer Leverkusen. So that experience, who knows, could be really, really valuable in a group where there isn't a ton of that.
Yeah, Gyökeres is one as well.
Gyökeres, Gabriel Jesus, presumably.
Yes, of course.
But I think someone will doubtless come up with all the examples where I'm wrong. But I think that may be it. Certainly in terms of a major title.
Sure. Timber, did he win one of
Timber
Ajax?
may well have done with Ajax, and I don't know about Norgaard's early career, for example. But yeah,
There we go. Okay, listen, I think we better leave it there because I've got to get this podcast out to everybody. Also got to do a bit of catching up on Match of the Day and highlights before we talk about all the weekend's Premier League action in the 30 over on Patreon. You can join us there, patreon.com/Arseblog. Just checking, nobody else has been sacked since we started recording this, so that's good.
Okay. That's good. Thomas Frank's still in place. We'll have to see.
For now. All right. We'll leave it there. As ever, thank you so much as always for being with us, folks. Really appreciate you being here, subscribing, downloading, and all the rest. And we will catch you on the next one.
Bye-bye.